Hey Christopher, how are you?
Good.
I got it.
Waiting,
What?
waiting on Wolpe. I'm gonna give him a mic.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know how the discussion left in the past?
How?
Yeah.
He puts two chairs in. So I'm going to get two chairs. In the middle, like the banquet chairs. Yeah. They put them up on the back. I don't know where you guys keep them.
It's 3:30, and all is well. What do you want to know? Okay, so as you may know, Sinai had several rabbis before I came, like in succession. And my father told me, I don't need another chair, no. My father told me that he was worried about my coming here because I've told some of you this story. It was an Eretz Ochel et Yoshveha. That's what the spies tell Moses when they come back from Israel. An Eretz Ochel et Yoshveha means a land that eats its own. That was what my father said about Sinai before I came, because he had seen rabbi after rabbi after rabbi come here and not had a happy experience. By the way, thank God he lived long enough to change his opinion and to feel good about the fact that I came here and to speak from this bima. But I just want you to know that there are two ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it was a big risk to come to Sinai because they'd had bad experiences with rabbis, but that's not actually how I looked at it. I thought, boy, if all the rabbis before me had a bad time, they must be really desperate for a rabbi to succeed, and maybe they'll be more helpful if I come. And in fact, it was clear when I was in the interviews that the people very, very much wanted me to succeed because they were worried about the synagogue at the time. And so when I first came, people asked, I think, serious questions, but I saw a lot of chances for the synagogue to grow in different ways. And I made two changes, thank you, when I first came right away. The first change was, I don't know if any of you remember, the ark used to be electrified. So you would push a button and it would open. And you would push another button and it would close. And it was just way too Hollywood for me. I thought, I cannot have an ark that opens electronically. And the only other change that I made right away was Ariel Cohen used to play music during the silent Amidah. And I thought it was the silent Amidah, and so I asked him to stop playing music. The reason those were the only two changes was because my friend Bob Wexler, who at the time was president of the University of Judaism, said to me, which made a lot of sense, and it's advice I've given to a lot of other rabbis since. He said, remember, this is people's home. Some of them have been there, their parents have been there, their children have been there, and you're a visitor. And you don't walk into someone else's home and rearrange the furniture. And I never forgot that metaphor. Even, by the way, now, there are people who've been here for far longer and hope to be here for many, many, many more years, so you have to be careful what it is that you change in their home, no matter how long you've been here. But the sort of standard rabbinic teaching is that you wait 2 or 3 years before you change anything in a synagogue if you're the rabbi. And also, by the way, since I mentioned Ariel Cohen, this is Ariel Cohen's last year. The music will change next year. A lot of it will be the same, but some of it will change. You'll have a new musical director. I want you to know that I am fully behind that change. I did not grow up with an organ and choir, and even though I have grown to love some of it, it's still not exactly the musical accompaniment that I'm used to, and I still hear the organ as separately in some sense, as an instrument, even though I also think like Ariel is an absolute master. And if I'm going to have anybody play the organ, I want it to be Ariel Cohen. He's really just, you can hear it when other people come in and substitute for him. Everybody knows right away it's not Ariel because he's just the best. So anyway, those are at least a few thoughts. I'm happy to take any questions or comments about the years I've been here. Yes?
I just want to make a comment that you said you started out with really not a question. In a way, coming in with no other rabbis, you don't feel like you have to fill up big shoes.
Right.
And that was the one thing that I thought you probably benefited from.
No doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And also, I got to hire my own. I mean, the first year I was here alone. I knew Sherry Hirsch because she'd been my student in rabbinical school. So the second year I hired Rabbi Hirsch, and then over the years, different rabbis, and that was a great advantage. And I have to say, okay, so there's no reason not to tell you all these things. So when I first came here, all right, those of you who know me know that one big area that I know nothing about is money and finance at all. I'm like the anti of the stereotype of the Jew. So I remember I came here and they put a balance sheet in front of me and they said, so tell me, how many budgets have you looked at? And I said, like, this makes the first. I said, and if I never look at another one, that would be okay with me. And I want to tell you why that was a good thing. Because this may or may not surprise you, but Sinai Temple has a lot of very strong lay people. And a rabbi who came in and said, I want to micromanage this place, and I want to control the budget, and I want to decide everything, would have gotten killed. But a rabbi who came in and said, you know what, I'm not really a manager. I hope like the executive director can manage people, and I'm not really a finance person. I hope you guys can do the budget. I just want to do the teaching and the services, was a perfect fit for Sinai. Because we already had people, don't forget, when you have weak rabbinic leadership over many years, or rabbinic leadership that isn't successful for whatever reason, what happens is the lay people take over. And the lay people had taken over. And then they hired a rabbi who didn't want to run the stuff they took over anyway. I was like, I never went to a budget. I went to one budget committee meeting because the head of the budget committee wanted me to vote for something. He said, it'll be really important, Rabbi, if you come and vote for. So I went and I voted. But other than that, I never went to a budget committee meeting. So it was also in that way a perfect fit, because the synagogue was looking for somebody who would just do the rabbi stuff. I know a lot of rabbis who are CEOs. And by the way, they're brilliant at it. I'll give you an example. When I was first going to be the rabbi of Sinai, the only person I'd ever seen run a synagogue was my father. And he said to me, and I think wisely, I can't teach you, because my father's like me, right? He's not a finance person. He said, listen, I can't teach you how to run a synagogue. He said, I had a 1-year internship at Adat Ariel with Moshe Rothblum. He said, see if you can learn from Moshe, but it was an internship. I didn't learn that much. I was in school. So I decided when I came here, I would interview all these rabbis about how they run their synagogues. So I interviewed Rabbi Schulweiss. He gave me 62,000 ideas in 10 minutes because he was just remarkable. He was a remarkable man and a wonderful man. I interviewed a bunch of other rabbis, and then I made a lunch with Rabbi Zeldin, who built Stephen S. Wise. So this was really interesting, both a blessed memory. Now, the reason I say this is because Zeldin was a CEO. Zeldin built that thing, raised all the money, did all the budgets. That was Zeldin's. So first of all, he shows up at the lunch with about 6 or 7 files, big, thick files. And I said, Rabbi Zeldin, what are these? And he said, I assumed you wanted me to tell you why we didn't accept some of your students to our school. So I brought their files. And I thought, first of all, this guy really thinks, right? I mean, other people, like, you want to have a lunch? We'll have a lunch. He thinks, what could he want from me? How can I prepare? And how am I ready? And I said, like, you're way ahead of me. I don't even know who my students are. I didn't know who was accepted or not. I just want to know, how do you run your synagogue? And this is what he said to me. He said, it's all about the budget. That's what he said. He said, I don't care what your lay people tell you they care about. You want to know what they care about? Look at the budget. That will tell you what they really care about. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, I look at a budget and it doesn't tell me anything. It told Zeldin a lot, but it didn't tell me very much. But I saw his mode of being a rabbi could be enormously successful. And I realized that there were, like, professorial rabbis, like Schulweis was one, although he created a lot of programs, and there were CEO kinds of rabbis. Another CEO kind of rabbi is my very close friend Steve Leader, who knows the budget of his synagogue, builds the buildings, all of that kind of stuff. Now, he writes books, he gives sermons. I don't mean to say that there's like a split. Zeldin also knew a lot, gave wonderful sermons. But if you took a Steve Leader or a Shai Zeldin and you said to them, or an Uri Hersher, and you said to them, you can no longer be a rabbi, they could easily say, okay, I will be CEO of General Motors. Really. Or run Facebook, and they could do it, because they have that managerial skill. Me, Facebook would be worse off than it even is now. So when I came here, it was, in that sense, a very, very good fit, because they didn't want a manager, and they didn't want a CEO. They wanted someone to teach. Okay, next. Yeah, Ariel.
First of all, thank you for a really remarkable 26 years.
Thank you.
26 years from now, when we reflect on your time at Sinai Temple, what do you hope that legacy will be?
26 years from now, when you reflect on my time at Sinai Temple, what do I hope that legacy will be? My greatest hope is that the legacy will be, boy, he really made Sinai good, but after he left, it got great. I'm serious. I want it to be better after I leave, not, I don't want people to look back and say, oh, that was the golden age of Sinai. So I hope, and this, I have to say, COVID put a dent in this hope, because it's going to take rebuilding. But I really hope that the foundation is here such that the future will be even better. I also think for a lot of rabbis, the real legacy is that, there's somewhere here, there's a 10-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid who in 30 years is going to remember something that I said or did and tell their kid. I remember, like I did today with Jacob Cohn, what he did with Chodos. For those of you who were there for the sermon, when the new rabbi came in, Rabbi Chodos, what Jacob Cohn did, who was the sort of founding rabbi of Sinai, not exactly, but sort of. Someone asked him a question, and he said, I know what the answer to the question is. The answer to the question is, I would ask the new rabbi, Rabbi Chodos, which was a beautiful way of his saying, I'm handing all my authority to Chodos. The fact that this is now, 40 years later or more, that I'm telling that story, that's what I really hope for. So.
Rabbi, I remember very well when you first started to do services upstairs on the third floor gym. I've been in Sinai since 1973, been through that experience of a lot of the others. And people down here in the congregation, the big machers got the Elias and so forth. When you were doing the service up there, there was a call out for volunteers. There weren't that many people who were going to help, and they needed volunteers. So I volunteered, and I did the Torah reading on the second day, the Akedah. And as the word got out, more people went upstairs than almost stayed down here. But anyway, though, I think even after you were ordained, you actually came back to do the service upstairs. Yep. So you've been doing services continuously, even during the hiatus when you were teaching. And then when you came back here as the senior rabbi, and you did the service down here, I can say now, I asserted my adverse possession rights on the Akedah. So since you've been here, I have had the honor of doing the reading on the second day. When my sons were younger, I could persuade them actually to come up to the bima to sit next to me while I was doing the Akedah. But I remember that began the first year that you were here 39 years ago.
I remember a lot of the rabbis in the course of being here. And one thing I also want to say, which actually goes back to the rabbi thing, is the fit between a rabbi and a synagogue has to be right. Rabbi Schrantz, brilliant man, a wonderful rabbi, went to New York and had a tremendous success at his synagogue in New York. So maybe the fit wasn't right at Sinai, but the rabbi was right. It's just the fit wasn't right. And if I went to a different kind of synagogue where what they needed was budgeting and fundraising, and they would say, Rabbi, it's very nice you give a good speech, but we need you to do, CEO work. We need you to manage the staff, wouldn't be right. So what I was lucky in that from the very beginning, Sinai was a sort of natural fit for what it was that I wanted to do. And I remember the first time I came down to give a sermon here. You know which rabbi brought me down? Any guesses? Tutnauer. Moshe Tutnauer. Remember Moshe Tutnauer? He was here for 2 years. And he said to me, all these people keep going upstairs. Why don't you come downstairs, give a sermon on Shabbos? So I did. That was the first time I gave a sermon in the sanctuary, was because of Moshe Tutnauer, who he was a character. I enjoyed him no end. I remember during that service, he walked over to Mayor Finkelstein. These are all stories I can tell now. I couldn't tell for years. He walked over to Mayor Finkelstein, and then he came back and he said, want to know what I said to him? I said, yeah, what'd you say to him? He said, referring to the choir, he said, I told him, I wish the goyim in the back would stop shrieking so I can hear you daven. That was Tutnauer. He was great, and apparently also a very good basketball player. But anyway, so yeah. I have a lot of Sinai memories, yes.
Can you share one of your fun memories, funny memories from here?
Fond or funny memories from here? Oh, God. So let's see. What is a fond or funny memory that I haven't shared? I have to tell you, one of my fond memories is seeing, and this is not unique because this is true of every parent who ever lived, is seeing my daughter in the school plays. I loved that. She dressed as Woodstock from Charlie Brown, and she had this like yellow feather thing. And I don't know how many of you saw, my daughter was here this morning, but my daughter was that kid. She has a little bit of her father's gene in her. She was the kid who never learned the words to the songs. So while all the other kids were singing a song, she was mouthing it, but it was clear that she had no idea, like, what they were talking about. And I remember that. I also remember when she used to come up here and sit on my lap when she was a little kid on Shabbat and say Shabbat Shalom into the microphone. I remember that very fondly. Let's see, what else? can I think. I mean, I also remember a lot of people who were here over the years, fondly, and some who are not here anymore. Like I remember when I first came, Joseph. I don't know how many of you remember him. He was a Russian immigrant. He had all the finances of Sinai Temple in his head. Literally. Nobody knew what any budget line was. You asked Joseph and he would tell you. Nothing was written down. What's that? I couldn't hear. Well, that was Carlos. Carlos knew everybody's birthday. Carlos, unfortunately, both of them have passed away. Joseph left a mess because when he died, nobody knew what anything was. We had to reconstruct it all. Carlos knew everybody's birthday. That's true. Some of the maintenance guys, Tony, Carlos, a bunch of them have been really, Mario has been here. Ron and Mario have been here as long as I have. They really, I mean, you get to know a place like from the inside when you're here for so many years. I remember, I have very fond memories of the trips that we took. And I would say just about my most treasured memory is that remarkable morning, that Pesach morning, when in the middle of the Intifada, we decided to raise money and to bring it to groups in Israel who were nothing military, just people who were treating those in trauma because there were so many bombings. I mean, do you remember it was like every day there was another bombing? And so there were all these groups that were treating not only the wounded, but also their families and the trauma and people who witnessed the bombing. I mean, you can imagine what it is to actually see a bombing and the aftermath of a bombing. And on one Pesach morning, people got up and we raised almost $3 million. And the amazing part of it was they just got up and said, I am so-and-so and I pledge this. And then all the checks actually came in. It's like nobody said, I'm so-and-so and I pledge this, and then they went home and forgot about it. And we brought millions of dollars on this trip to Israel, and we gave them to all these various organizations. It was an unbelievable outpouring of generosity. I remember that very well. And I remember the beginning of the sermon was that I asked people to picture a backpack and then to picture a cell phone in the backpack, and the cell phone keeps ringing, but nobody's answering because it's a child's backpack. And the parents are calling because they don't know where their child is, but their child was on a bus. And I was trying to make alive what was going on every day in Israel. It was horrendous. And the congregation was unbelievably responsive and generous. So there are a couple of memories. Yes, Sarah.
What's your breakfast meal tonight?
Julie, are you here? I've been going to the Platts for how many years?
Oh,
Forever. Since before the dawn of time. So it's my oldest brother, it's basically a bagel and whatever they have to put on it. And the truth is, weirdly, I get really hungry about 4 o'clock. By the time breakfast comes, I'm not so hungry. It's the strangest thing. It's like I so look forward to eating now and then. But my brother, for many, many years when we were growing up, my oldest brother, Steve, he had a tradition. I haven't asked him lately. I can't imagine he still does this, of breaking his fast with a Pop-Tart. That was his tradition. So every year, a Pop-Tart, brown sugar frosted, in case you were wondering. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so here's how Friday Night Live was born, which I think programmatically was clearly the biggest thing that I was part of creating. What happened was I went to B'nai Yeshurun in New York, and I saw that they had a musical service on Friday night, and it drew all sorts of people. And I came here and I realized there was no organized service. This sounds crazy now, but this was 25 years ago. There was no organized service for singles in Los Angeles. There just wasn't. So I remember, and I will give her credit, I remember I said to Eileen, I said, you know, I'd like to ask Craig Talman. He's the best, but he won't do it. He's not going to do. He never did service. He had a contract with Disney. He was doing kids music and doing really well. She said, ask him. I'm not going to ask him. She said, ask him. It's the worst that happens. So I said, okay. So I set up a lunch with Craig Talman. I said to him, I want to do this service for singles. He says, I do kids. I'm Disney. And I said, and we talked about it. He said, okay, we'll try it. So 2 things I want to say. One, I deeply regret, which is the first service, I was intent on not having kids there because I was afraid if there were kids there, singles wouldn't come, which is true. And also I was afraid since Craig was a kids musician that, you know, you'd get all kids. So I asked one family to leave that had kids, and I still feel bad about it 25 years later. I made them leave, and they were like, but we're here and our kids are here and you're forcing us out of a service, and I made them leave. You grow and you learn. Anyway, I don't think they would have torpedoed Friday Night Live because there were 2 little kids there. Nonetheless, I didn't ask anyone. It didn't even occur to me to ask anyone, right? We had the organ, but we'd never had any other kind of instrumentation at Sinai ever. And Craig brought a band. So I said, just do it. We had 300 people the first Friday Night Live, and we had 600 people the next time. And then by the third time, there were 1,000, and after that, there were 1,000 or more every single time. And we did all sorts of variations of it. Sometimes we had classes before, sometimes after. And it was for about, I think Craig and I did it probably for about 17, 18 years. It was fantastic. Had a great time. And the music that he wrote went all over the world, right? A lot of it is very well known. Hashkivenu ad Hashem. That was Craig's for Friday Night Live. He put out a Friday Night Live album, and I've gone to like France and heard people singing those songs. And then Friday Night Live became a thing such that they just introduced one, a brand new one. What do they call it? I can't remember. In Temple Emmanuel in New York, the huge Reformed temple. It's still spinning off all over the place. And that was a great thing. But at a certain point, so 17, 18 years, I said to Craig, have you noticed that our crowd is getting older? It was supposed to be 21 to 39. I said, you know why they're getting older, Craig? Getting older because we're getting older. And now, by the way, there were lots of other services. And so we turned it over to Rabbis Guzik and Sherman, and this will tell you, this also says something about the change of rabbinic leadership. Now they have a dinner. What we used to hear all the time was it's a meat market, 1,000 people, and all of them are like checking each other out. Remember, there was also no dating online back then because there was no online. Now they have a dinner where people organically meet each other. Yeah, it's smaller, but actually people interact. And they meet each other and they have a dinner and it's got a different feel, but it's still the same idea, which is that I think probably at this point hundreds of marriages have come from Friday Night Live. So that's a great thing. I still remember, I unfortunately don't remember the name of the couple, but I remember the first Friday Night Live baby, right? Where somebody came back and said, we met at Friday Night Live and this is our child, and I thought, okay, my work here is done. we did it. What's that? Yeah, you're a Friday Night Live baby, there you go. And not only does she write poetry, but she sang for us. So you see, it's all perfect circle.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
As everybody knows here and outside of here, your sermons are just magnificent. So I always wanted to know what goes into that, to writing a sermon for a specific Yom Kippur or Shabbat or whatever.
You want the honest?
Yes.
Okay.
And how you come up with it and What's your advice?
Okay, so I'm a very bad model, seriously, for speaking, because here's what happened. First of all, for some reason, and I don't know why, and this is not like something I earned, it's just something that was given me, words don't fail me. I'm sure one day they will, but from the time I was young, if I had to give a presentation, I never prepared. I just always knew I could get up and I could give the presentation. And so on Shabbat, very often, I literally don't know what I'm going to say as I walk over to the synagogue. I have a general idea. On Thursday, we give the topic. And the reason we give the topic on Thursday, by the way, is because Terry Schiavo, who was a woman that was a big case about whether you could pull the plug or not, and I said that I was going to speak about it, and a lot of people came to hear, and after that, every Thursday, we're supposed to give the topic of the sermon. Many times, Gary Feynman, and before him, the other people who are handling it, will email me and say, what are you going to speak about on Shabbos? And just then, I will give a topic that is general enough sometimes so that I can fit something into it, because I don't always know what it's going to be. If I have an idea, I can give a talk. And I have, for some reason, and again, it's not something that I earned, it was just something that I have a vast file system in my head of quotes and stories that come to me spontaneously when I'm talking. So I will get up and I'll all of a sudden think, oh yeah, this fits, right? That story fits. Now that's not true, by the way, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pesach morning, which are the three biggest sermons of the year, I really think about what I want to say. I'll make notes, and I will, because I think by speaking, I will pace around the house and deliver the sermon from the notes. And then I'll say, oh, I think that's good, and I'll write that down, right? And then I'll reorder them. When I was a kid in school and you had to write an outline and then write a paper, I literally would write the paper and then write the outline. Because I can only think by talking, so an outline doesn't help me. Because I have to talk and then I can see what I said. So I talk my sermons and then I end up writing them. Which is why, even though someone right now, God bless him, Sid Friedman, he has employed a service to start transcribing the sermons, they're not going to read like they sound, because they're, by their nature, talks, because they come out of talking, and so they're not composed the same way. I mean, I still will be happy to have them, and maybe I can edit them into some form that will be worth it. So I've taught classes on public speaking because there are things I know about it, but my one concern, I express this to the other rabbis, is they shouldn't speak like I speak, because it's not a helpful model. When I was an intern for Moshe Rothblum, he made me write out every word, because that's what he did. And by the way, some magnificent speakers do that. Harold Schulweis wrote every single word and then practically memorized it, and would give the speeches, and you wouldn't know that he wrote it out, but he wrote out every word. But to give speeches sort of off the cuff naturally that mean something to you, that deepen as you go just because that's the way your brain works, doesn't help for most people. So I don't generally tell the rabbinic interns that they should write their sermons the way I do. Instead, I advise them to write it out, and then I can look at them and critique them. But it's very seat of the pants, and I don't know why that is, but all I need is an idea or a story or two ideas. And so sometimes I'll have a note or two, and sometimes I'll make it up in my head. But I remember that Sherry Hirsch, when I first started, used to always say to me, let me see the notes for that sermon. just like as a joke, and I would show her, and there would be like 3 things written down. And anyway, so. Yes?
I have 2 questions. I'm going to
Okay,
be greedy. I wouldn't have asked you this, but you referenced it in your sermon this morning. Can you talk about what it was like when you were still fulfilling your responsibilities and you were very sick and people would want to shake your hand as they left services? And then my second question is if you could tell us a bit about what you anticipate next year and what you hope to achieve from it.
So when I was sick, people were generally pretty respectful and kind. And if I said, there was a time when I didn't walk around and shake people's hands when I thought I was probably really immune compromised in the middle of chemotherapy. But it wasn't for that long. And the good thing about I had a brain tumor and I had lymphoma. And the good thing about both of them was that the period of acute fear, of real terror, was relatively short. Because, first of all, when I first had the brain tumor, I had a seizure, and for a while I wasn't so aware of what was going on anyway. By the time they found out that I had a seizure because I had a tumor, between that time and the time I actually had the operation, and they told me the tumor was benign, wasn't so long. That was the period of real terror when you assume, because when I woke up from you didn't ask this, but I'll tell you anyway, when I woke up from the surgery, the surgeon told me there was an 80% chance it was malignant. So I assumed it was, when someone tells you 80%, you think, okay, I assumed it was malignant. And then I remember Tim Clousey, God bless him, at UCLA, called me on a Sunday morning when Martin Gilbert was the scholar in residence here. I'll never forget it. And I couldn't be here because I was home with a brain tumor. And he called me and told me that it was benign. And I said, "You mean I don't need anything?" He said, "No." He said, "I don't even have to have radiation?" I never forgot what he said. If you lay on the table to get radiation, I would dive in front of you and stop you because you don't need anything. You're fine. I was like, I called, I remember Rabbi Schuldenfrei, and he went and announced to the people who were sitting here listening to Martin Gilbert, "I just heard from Rabbi Wolpe, his tumor is benign." So yeah, that was a dramatic one. That was really, the lymphoma, once the chemo started working and we knew it was working, so I didn't know, I'm not cured, I'm in remission, but it's been in remission for a long time. So over time, you just start to think about it less. Next year. So Harvard has a visiting scholar program, and it's designed for clergy who are on sabbatical. They go there, they study for a year, and then they go back to their congregation or their church or whatever. So I was put in touch with the president of Harvard, who, by the way, the outgoing president of Harvard, who's a good conservative Jew, and davens at the shul of a rabbi I know, and he said, okay, so he basically said to me, so it's not a sabbatical, so you're leaving, but sounds like it would fit you, let's talk to the guy at the divinity school. So I spoke to the head of the divinity school, who's a really lovely guy, and he said, all you need to be the visiting professor here or visiting scholar here is someone from the divinity school or from Harvard's Jewish Studies to sponsor you. So I said, John Levinson, who's a Bible scholar whom I know and who has been here actually and spoken, I said, would it be okay if I called John Levinson and asked him if he would sponsor me? And he said, no. I said, why not? He said, because I'll sponsor you. And I said, oh, okay, if the head of the divinity school wants to sponsor me, I'll take that. And it was like that quick. And so I thought, first of all, both my parents grew up in Boston. So I have family there. And I thought that it will be just a question of finding an apartment for a year. I hope, by the way, that I will already find a place here in LA before I leave. First of all, so I can move some of my stuff there, and second, so when I come back during the year I'll have a place to stay, but also because I fully intend on coming back here for a billion reasons, Sinai being prominent among them. But I think that a year away will be wonderful. I mean, I have different ideas for books. I don't know. There are other things that people have suggested to me. What I ideally, like in my ideal world, not that anybody asked, but here I am talking and we have 5 minutes before Mincha. In my ideal world, I would live bi-coastally. Not Boston, LA, but New York, LA. And I would basically live in LA, but I would go to New York often, like once a month, because, first of all, I don't know if you know this, there are a lot of Jews in New York. A lot of Jews. And I work with a foundation called the Maimonides Fund that is out of New York, and I'd like to teach there. So in an ideal world, whatever books would be or other things would be, I'd like to be able to teach here and there, and to write and speak and that kind of stuff. We'll see. Yes, Ariel.
Can you give an example, maybe if you have like a way that you changed or grown as a person?
Can I give an example of the way I have changed or grown as a person? I think my theory is that the reason academics tend to be immature, and I know that that's a very broad statement, but it's a broad statement, but it's not entirely untrue, is because they teach the same age every year, year after year after year. You spend 50 years teaching 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and it doesn't force you to grow. I know this because I already, from years of teaching rabbinical school, I could use the same notes every year, right? I mean, there are two ways of succeeding. One is you change your presentation, the other is you change your audience, right? And every year you get a new class, you can give the same thing. So first of all, in some ways, I've had to learn many, many, many more things because I couldn't give you the same. I used up my old stuff pretty fast, right? And then I had to get new stuff. But also, I think as a when I came here to be the rabbi, I was in my late 30s, but I didn't know really what it was to face death. I mean, we'd had family tragedy because my mother had a stroke, but nobody close to me, not my parents, nobody else who was really close to me apart from grandparents had died. I didn't know what it was to have I'll give you one really good example of how I've grown. I had no idea when I came here what a Persian Jew was. No idea. And I'm not, with all the questions of what it is to be a Persian Jew and an Ashkenazi Jew or so on, what was most powerful for me is here is a community that grew up in a world that is radically different from the world I grew up in. And I never really got to know people closely. I mean, I took my junior year abroad in Edinburgh. Scotland's not that different from growing up in Philadelphia. But Tehran is really different. And so you grow when you meet someone from a radically different world, and you have to, or you force yourself to, understand them. And my understanding why some of the Persian community thinks the way it does, acts the way it does, is not my default, is incredibly growthful. Because once that changes, you realize every time now I read somebody, and I'm not talking about Persian Jews, I'm talking about just in general, I read something that is radically different from what I assume, my immediate go-to right now is, you don't understand. You need first to understand why would somebody say something like this, as opposed to, obviously they're wrong, because I know they're wrong because I'm me. So that I think I even believe had I gone to, there are lots of things I could have learned had I gone to an Ashkenazi congregation. But that I never would have learned, not the same way. And that's a really, and that is a really sort of radical lesson to learn in life. To be forced, and the way it works, by the way, and then we have to close, and here's how you do it, in case you want to do it. You get to know someone as a human being before you get to know their opinions that differ from you. Because then you can't dismiss them. If you read someone online who has an opinion that differs from you, it's easy to dismiss them because you don't know them. But once you know people, once you've sat with them, once you've talked with them, once you've been to their home, once you've been at their funerals and at their weddings, you can't say anymore, ugh, these ridiculous people, how could they think this or think that? Don't they know better? Because you realize that there are people as smart, as sensitive, as thoughtful, as learned as you are who think something completely different from what you think, which is an amazing gift to have. It really is. And the only thing I'll close with is, but you have to learn it again and again and again and again. We're so predisposed to believe our own point of view, since we can only see with our own eyes, that you have to constantly remind yourself that those people who disagree with you because they see the world in a different way, and it's worth learning something about that. So now it's time for Mincha.
I looked at my shoulders and said, uh-oh, I must have dropped my...
Yeah, and I drank it. Yeah. And I drank it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, I drank it.
I didn't see you. Well, I guess I saw it not too long ago. It's not that often. All right, wish me luck. This thing on, right? Is this thing on? Is this on right?
The only corrections we have to finish at 5:45.
Okay.
It's 361.
Vayehi ben Soa Aaron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udvar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'gedushato Garelu L'Adonai uneramemo shmo yachdav lecha Adonai hagadula v'hagvura v'hatiferet 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 v'chanetzar v'chanetzar v'chachod ki chol b'shamayim uva'aretz ki chol b'shamayim uva'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamalacha Vechamit Naseh Lechol Lerosh Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Hatiferet V'Hanetza V'Chachod Ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz Ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz Lecha Adonai hamalacha V'chamit na'aseh lechol rosh Romemu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'yishtachavu V'yishtachavu Adam raglav kadosh hu romemu romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu v'yishtachavu lechar koresho ki kadosh Adonai ki kadosh Adonai Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Grab my dollars. Al shlosha devarim. Al shlosha devarim. Al shlosha devarim. Haolam omed. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, olam omer, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim.
Yamod Rishon, Baruch Shanatan Torah, Le'am Yisrael.
It was like running. It was like, what am I going to sing?
Please be seated. The Torah reading this morning. The Torah reading for this Mincha service is found on page 363.
Right there.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bacha Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael emrata alehem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. K'maseh Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem bo lo tasu. Uchmaseh Eretz Canaan asher ani mevi etchem shama lo tasu ובחוקותיהם לא תלכו, את משפטי תעשו, ואת חוקותי תשמרו ללכת בהם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ושמרתם את חוקותי ואת משפטי, אשר יעשה אותם אדם וחי בהם. אני אדוני.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamod Sheni.
Chaim ben Yaakov.
Chaim ben Yaakov. Ruth. Sheni. Right here.
Baruch hu et Adonai hambarak.
Baruch le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hambarak le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bacha banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ish el kosher b'saro lo tikrevu legalot erva. Ani Adonai ervat avicha v'ervat imecha lo tegale. Imecha hi lo tegale ervata. Ervat eshes avicha lo tegale. Ervat avicha hi. Ervat achotecha bat avicha. Bat imecha moledet bayit o moledet chutz lo tegale ervata ervat bat binecha o bat bitecha lo tegale ervatan ki ervatacha hena ervat bat eshet avicha moledet avicha achotecha hi lo tegale ervata ervat achot avicha lo tegale she'er avicha hi ervat achot imecha lo tegale ki she'er imcha hi ervat achi avicha lo tegale el ishto lo tikra lo dacha hi ervat kalatecha lo tegale eshet bincha hi lo tegale ervata ervat eshes achicha lo tegale ervat achicha hi ervat isha vita lo tegale et bat bena v'et bat bita lo tikach legalot ervata shara hina zimahi v'isha el achota lo tikach litzrohor legalot ervata aleha b'chayeha v'elisha b'nida tumata lo tikrav legalot ervata v'yehel eshet amitecha lo titein shechavdecha lezara letamava umizaracha lo titein lehavir lamolach velo techalel et shem Elohecha ani Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
The Maftir reading from the Torah is found on page 364, verse 22.
Yamod
Yitzchak ben Yaakov
Yitzchak ben Yaakov
B'Dvorah.
V'Vorah Shlishi
Shlishi.
right there.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Amen. Aviet Zachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha toevahi uvachol behema lo titein shechavtecha letamava veisha lo tamod lifnei behema riva tevelhu al titamu bechol eile ki bechol eile nitme hagoyim asher ani mishaleach mipnechem v'tidma haaretz v'avkod avona aleha v'taki haaretz et yoshveha ushmartem atem et chukotai v'et mishpatai v'lo tasu b'kol hatoivot ha'ele ha'ezrach v'hager hagor betochem ki et kol hatoevot ha'el asu anshe haaretz asher lifnechem v'tidma haaretz v'lo taki haaretz etchem v'tamachem ota kasher ka'a et hagoy asher lifnechem ki kol asher yaseh mikol hatoevot ha'el v'nichretu anfashot haosot mikerev amam ushmartem et mishmarti levilti asot mechukot hatoevot asher nasu lifnechem v'lo titamu bahem ani Adonai Elohechem.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yasher koach.
Please rise for the lifting and wrapping of the Sefer Torah.
Yamdu hagba v'glila.
V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe
Bnei Israel Ambi Adonai Biyad Moshe.
Please be seated.
Maftir Jonah, the Book of Jonah, is found on page 367. It is, of course, a perfect story for Yom Kippur because it is a story of God's forgiveness in spite of the unforgivingness sometimes of human beings. Jonah is supposed to preach to Nineveh and have them forgive. He doesn't want that because he's angry and vengeful. God, nonetheless, teaches him a lesson in forgiveness through unusual means, which is having him swallowed by a fish. But apparently it works. And we can follow the reading of the Book of Jonah on page 367.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim ratzav divrehem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai Habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo v'inviei hamet v'tzedek
Vayehi devar Adonai El Yonah ben Amitai lemor Kum lech el Ninveh ha'ir ha'gedolah ukra aleha yal taratam lefanai V'yakam Yonah livrok Tarshisha milifnei Adonai vayered Yafo vayimatza ani Yabaa Tarshish vayitein Sechara vayered ba lavo imahem Tarshisha milifnei Adonai Adonai, Hatil Ruach Gedolah El Hayam, Vayehi Sa'ar Gadol Bayam Vehaniyah, Chishva Lehishaver. Vayireu hamalachim, vayizaku ish el Elohav, vayatilu et hakelim asher be'anya el hayam lehakel me alehem vayonah yorad al yarketei hasfina vayishkav Radam Vayikra elav Rav HaChovel Vayomer lo malacha nirdam akum Kira el Elohecha ulai it ashet Elohim lanu velo novid Vayomeru ish el re'ehu lechu napila goralot v'ned v'shelmi harahazot lanu vayapilu goralot vayipol hagoral al Yonah Vayomeru elav Hagidana lanu basher Lemihara hazod lanu Ma'malachatacha Me'ayin tavo Ma'artsecha V'yemize am atah Vayomer alehem ivri anochi v'yet Adonai Elohei hashamayim ani yarei asher asa et hayam v'yet hayabasha Vayireu hanashim yir'a gedolah Vayomeru elav mazot asita Ki yareu hanashim Ki milifnei Adonai hu voreach Ki higid lahem Vayomeru elav manaselach Vayishtok hayam me aleinu Ki hayom holech v'so'er Vayomer alehem sa'uni Vahatiluni el hayam V'yishtok hayam alechem Ki odei ani Ki vo sheli Asar hagadol hazeh alechem Vayachteru hanashim lehashiv el hayabasha velo yacholu ki hayam holech v'so'er alehem Vayikre'u el Adonai, Vayomeru, Ana Adonai al nanu v'da b'nefesh ha'ir hazeh, v'al titein aleinu dam naki, ki ata Adonai kasher chafatzta asita. Vayiseu et Yonah vayitulu el hayam vayamod hayam mizapo vayireu hanashim yirah gedola et Adonai vayizbechu zevach ladonai vayidru nedarim. Vayeman Adonai dag gadol livloa et Yonah vayehi Yonah bimei hadag shlosha yamin ushlosha leilot vayitpalel Yonah el Adonai Elohav mimei hadaga vayomer karati mitzara li el Adonai vayaneni mi beten sheol shivati shamata koli Vatashlicheni mitzula bilvad yamim v'nahar yasoveveni kol mishbarecha v'galecha alai avaru v'ani amarti nigrashti mineged einecha ach osif lehabit el heichal kodshecha Afafuni mayim ad nefesh, tehom yasoveveni suf kavush leroshi, lekitzvei harim yaradati haaretz, brichecha badi leolam, vatahal mishachat, chaya Adonai Elohai. Vehitatef alai nafshi et Adonai zacharti vetavo elecha tevilati el heichal kodshecha. Mishamrim havle shav chasta yazovu va'ani b'kol toda ez b'cholach asher nadarti ashalema Yeshuata ladonai Vayomer Adonai lahadag vayakeh et Yonah el hayabasha Vayehi davar Adonai el Yonah shenit lemor kum lech el ninvei ha'ir hagedolah ukra eleha et kriyaha asher anochi dover elecha Vayakam Yonah vayelech El ninvei kidvar Adonai v'ninvei haita irgadola le'Elohim mahalach shloshet yamim Vayachel Yonah lavo va'ir mahalach yom echad vayikra vayomar od arba'im yom v'ninvei nechepachet vayaminu anshei ninvei be'Elohim Vayikratsom, vayilbeshu sakim, migdolam, viad katanam. Vayigad hadavar el melech ninvei, vayakam mikiso, vayaver adarto me'alav, vayechasak, vayeshev al ha'efer. Vayazeg vayomer benin mitam hamelech ugdolav lemor ha'adam b'habehemah habakar v'hatzon al yitamu me'umah al yir'u umayim al yishtu Vayit kasu sakim Adam v'habehema Vayikru el Elohim bechazka Vayashuvu ish midarko hara'a Umin chehamas asher b'chapehem Miodea Yashuv Venicham Ha-Elohim Veshav Mecharona Povalono Ved Vayar Elohim Et Masehem Kishavu Midarkam Hara'a Vayinahem Elohim Al Hara'a Asher Diber Lasod Lahem below us. Vayera El Yonah Ra'a Gedola Vayichar lo Vayitpalel El Adonai Vayomar Ana Adonai Halo Zedevari Ad Heyoti Al Admati Al Kain Kidamti Livroach Tarshisha Ki Yadati Ki Yata El Chanun Virachum Erech Apayim Virav Chesed Venicham Al Hara V'hata Adonai kachna et nafshi mimeni ki tov moti mechaya Vayomer Adonai hahetev haralach Vayetze Yonah min ha'ir Vayeshev mikedem la'ir Vayas lo sham sukat Vayeshev tachteha batzel ad asher yir'eh ma'yeh ba'ir Vayaman Adonai Elohim Kikayon Vayal Me'al Yonah Liotzel Al Rosho Latzilo Marato Vayismach Yonah Kikayon Simchat Gedolah Vayeman Elohim Tolat Balod Hashachar Alamacharat Vatach Et Hakikayon Vayifash Vayehi Kizroach Hashemesh Vayeman Elohim Ruach Kadim Harishashit Vatach Hashemesh Al Rosh Yonah Vayitahalaf Vayish Al Et Nafsho Lamut Vayomer Tov Moti Mechaya Vayomer Elohim El Yonah Hahetev Charalecha Al Ki Kahayon Vayomer Hetev Charali Ad Mavet Vayomer Adonai Atachasda Al Ki Kayon Asher Lo Amalta Bo Velo Gidalto Shibin Leila Haya Uvin Laila Avad Va'ani lo achus al nidvei ha'ir ha'gedolah asher yesh ba harbe mishtem esrei ribo adam asher lo yada ben yamino lismolo uvehema rabba mi el kamoach no se avon viover al pesha li sheri nachalato lo hechezik lo adapo ki chafetz chesed hu Yashuv Yachachar Mechamenu Yichbosh Avonoteinu V'tashlich Bimsulot Yam Kol Chatotam Titen emet liYakov, chesed liAvraham, asher nishbat alavotenu mimei kedem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol olamim, tzadik bechol adorot, ho'el ne'eman, homer v'yoseh, hamedaber u'mekayim, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'davor echad midvarecha, achor lo yashuv rekam, Ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata, Baruch ata Adonai, ha'el ne'eman b'chol devarav. Rachem al Tzion ki hivet chayenu, v'laluvat nefesh toshia, bimheira v'yameinu, Baruch ata Adonai, misameach Tzion b'vaneha. Samechenu Adonai Eloheinu be'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha u'malchut Beit David meshichecha b'mheira yavo v'yagel libenu al kiso lo yeshev zar v'lo yinchalu od achirim et kevodo ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo shelo yichbe neiro leolam v'ed Baruch ata Adonai Magen David.
Amen. Yashkoach to Mark Dubin, who completed the longest Haftorah of the year, the entire Book of Jonah. Please rise. We continue now on page 372, returning the Torah to the Ark.
Et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, Odo al eretz v'shamayim, Bayarem keren le'amo, Tehillah lechol hasidav, Livnei Yisrael am kirovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, le David mizmor. Se'u she'arim rashechem v'hinasu pidchei olam yavo melecha kavod mize melecha kavod Adonai Izus v'gibor Adonai gibor milchama Se'u she'arim rashechem u'se'u pidchei olam v'yavo melecha kavod Mihu's melech hakavod, Adonai Tzvaot, Hu melech hakavod. Selah. Susharim Rashechem, Yavivitche Olam, Yo Melech HaKavod, Melech HaKavod, Who's a Melech HaKavod, Adonai Izus v'Gibor, Adonai Gibor, Gibor Milchama, Susharim Rashechem, Use'up Yitche Olam, Yo Melech HaKavod, Yo Melech HaKavod, Miuze Melech HaKavod, Adonai Izus v'Gibor, Gibor Milchama, Mihuze Melech HaKavod, Mihuze Melech HaKavod, Mihuze Melech HaKavod, HaKavod Selah. Mihuze.
Good job, Jerry.
Thank you. Uvnucho Yomar Kohanecha Yilvifut Tzedek V'chasidecha Yira'anenu Ba'avur David Avdecha Al Tashev P'nei Mishichecha Ki lekachto natati lachem Torati al ta'azovu Et chayim chi L'machazikim ba V'tomachecha me'ushar Derachecha darchei noam V'chol netivotecha Shalom Hashive enu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem.
Chatzi Kaddish, bottom of page 373.
Yitgadal v'kadash Shemei Rabbah V'alma divra kirutei V'amalith malachutei בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו אמן יהי שמהרה במבורא לעולם ולעולם העולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומן ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמר קודשה בריחו לעילה ולעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן והעלמיה וימרו Amen.
The silent Amidah is found page 213 to 221. When you've concluded your Amidah, please be seated. Please feel free to continue your Amidah. We continue on page 374 with the repetition, page 374.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rika, Elohei Rachel, Ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Agadol Yivomah El Elyon, Gomel Asadim Tovim, Ve'Konei Hakol, Ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot, U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo B'Ahava. Misor Chachamim U'Nevonim U'Milemet Dat Mevinim Evtecha Pi V'Vilav Tachanunim Lechalot Ulchanein Pnei Melech Malhei Rachamim Mochel V'Soleach V'Avonim Zochrenu lechaim, Melech chafetz b'chaim, v'chokruenu b'sefer chachayim, L'manecha Elohim chayim, Melech ozer v'oked, u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Voked Sarah Ata Gibor Elam Adonai Mechaye Metim Ata Rav Lecho Shia Mechakel Chaim Becheset Mechaye Metim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Berofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekaye Emunato Lishonei Afar Michamocha Bagivurot Umidamela Melech Memit Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha Av Rachamim Zocher Yitzurav L'chaim Berachamim V'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye hametim Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion Ledor vador Hallelujah V'ata kadosh Yoshev tehilot Yisrael elna
הכתוב היה נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר.
הכתוב היה נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, ולא לארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, כבודו מלא עולם, משרתה שואלים זה לזה, האם מקום כבודו לעומתה, ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני, ממקומו, ממקומו ומרחמים, ויחונם יחדים שמו, ערב הבוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים יהבה שמע מרים, שמע ישראל, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Hu Yashmienu, Berachamav Sheni, Sheni, Lana Kol Chai, Liot Lachem, Lelohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adir Adirenu, Adonai Adonenu, Marir Shimcha, Bechol Haaretz, Vaya Adonai Lemelcha Kol Haaretz, B'yom Ahui Adonai Echad, U'Shemo Echad, U'Divrei Kodechecha Katzuv, Lemor, Yimloch Adonai Leolam, Elochai Yitzion, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah. Ledor Lech, Al Tzachim Shulchan Hadish, V'Yachal Elohim Mipinu Moshe Lam Va'ed, Ki HaMelech Gadol V'Kadosh Atah.
Please be seated. Jerry continues on page 377.
Chamol Ma'asecha, V'Tismach Ma'asecha, V'Yomer Lecha Chosecha, B'Tzadeka Amusecha, Tukdash Adon Al Kol Ma'asecha. Uvechen ten kavtecha Adonai Eloheinu al kol ma'asecha v'baracha al kol ma shebarata v'yerucha kol ma'asim v'yishtachavu lefanecha kol haburim v'yasu chulam agudat achat v'asot retzoncha b'lev shalem k'mo shetatu Adonai Eloheinu shachal shiton lefanecha oz beyadecha ugvura biminecha v'shimcha nora al kol ma shebarata. Uvchen ten kavod, uvchen ten kavod, Adonai le'amecha, uvchen ten kavod. Tehillah l'recha, v'tikva l'dorashecha, u'fikchom peh, l'achadim lecha, uvchen ten kavod, uvchen ten kavod, uvchen ten kavod, Adonai le'amecha, uvchen ten kavod. Simcha le'artzecha v'sason le'irecha u'mitzvat keren le'David avdecha. Simcha le'artzecha v'sason le'irecha u'mitzvat keren le'David avdecha. Ve'arichat ne'leven Yishai meshichecha, leven Yishai meshichecha b'meira ve'amenu. Uvchen tzadikim yeru v'yismachu v'yasharim yalozu v'chasidim b'rina yagilu v'lata tikvat tzpiha v'chorisha kulam kashan tikle ki ta'avir mimshel zadon min haaretz. V'timloch ata Adonai levadecha al kol ma'asecha v'chartzion mishtam kevodecha u'yushalayim rekodshecha kakatu b'divrei kodshecha yimloch Adonai leolam Elohai Tzion ledor vador. Hallelujah. Kadosh ata V'nora shemecha v'neloha mibal adecha. Kadosh ata v'nora shemecha v'neloha mibal adecha. Kakatuv v'yibach Adonai tzivot b'mishpat ככתוב, ויהי באדוני צבאות ומשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך, המלך, המלך הקדוש. אתה עברתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו, רצית בנו, ומחנו מכל השונות, ישנו מצוותיך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לבתיך, ושמך הגדול הקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה את יום הכיפורים הזה. יום הכיפורים הזה למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה ולמחול בו את כל עוונותינו מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, יעלה ויבוא ויגיע ויראה וירצה וישמע, ויפקד ויזכר זיכרוננו וגדוננו, וזיכרון אבותינו, וזיכרון משיח בן דוד עבדך, וזיכרון ירושלים עיר קודשך, וזיכרון כל עמך בישראל לפניך, לפתע לטובה, להנו לחסד לרחמים לחיים ולשלום, ביום הכיפורים הזה. זוכרנו אלוהינו בו לטובה. אמן. ופוקדנו בו לברכה, ויושענו בו לחיים. אמן. ודבר ישועה ורחמים, ושפכוננו ורחם עלינו, ויושענו כי אליך עינינו, כי על מלך אנו ברחומתה.
Page 379.
אל מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות. אל מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות. מוחל אבנות עמו, מוחל אבנות עמו, מעביר ראשון מר במחילה לחטאים וסליחה לפושעים. עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, לא חרעתם תגמול, לא חרעתם תגמול. וירד אדוני בענן, וירצף עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבוד אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים, ברב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון בפשע והטע ונקה. וסלחת עווננו וחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מיכל לנו מלכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסעלה, ורחסת לכל קוראיך. זכור לנו ברית ראשונים כאשר אמרת, וזכרתי לכם ברית ראשונים, אשר הוצאתי אותם מארץ מצרים לעיני הגויים להיות לכם אלוקים. אני אדוני, בחפש ראינו כאב בחנן כאשר אמרת, מחיתי כאב אשעך בחנן חטאותיך, שובה אלי כי גאלתיך. זרוק עלינו מים טהורים וטהרנו כמה שכתוב, וזרקתי עליהם מים טהורים וטהרתם מכל טומאותיכם מכל גלוליהם אטהר אתכם. כפר אותנו ביום הזה ותרנו כמה שכתוב, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם. לפני אדוני תתארו. הביאנו אחד קודשך ושמחנו בבית תפילתך כמה שכתוב. והביא אותם אל הר קודשי ושימחתי בבית תפילתי כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרם לכל העמים.
Please rise as the ark is opened for Shema Kolenu, page 380.
Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus verachem alenu Tekabel berachamim uvratzon et tefillatenu. Hashivenu Adonai elecha, Hashivenu elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh yamenu kekedem. Al tashlichenu milfanecha, al tashlichenu milfanecha, al tashlichenu milfanecha, al tashlichenu milfanecha, veruach kodshecha al tikat mimenu. Al tashlichenu le'et zikna, al tashlichenu le'et zikna, al tashlichenu le'et zikna, al tashlichenu le'et zikna, kichlot kochenu, al tazvenu.
Al tazvenu Eloheinu, al techakmenu, Hashem Eloheinu.
Eloheinu b'le'avotenu. Man shimha gadol, timacha v'tislach levodneinu, kakatu b'nivei kodshecha, laman shimha Adonai, v'salachta lavoni, ki rav hu.
Page 381, we remain standing. Ki ahanu amen.
Eloheinu v'le'avotenu, Selach lanu, chalanu, kapelanu.
Anu amecha v'ata Eloheinu, anu v'nachvat avinu, anu v'nachvat Adonenu.
Yanu amecha v'yatza Eloheinu, anu v'anecha v'yatza avinu, anu avdecha v'yatza Adonenu, anu kalecha v'yatza elkenu, anu naldecha v'yatza goralenu, anu tzonecha v'yatza ro'enu, anu charmecha v'yatza notrenu, Anu fulatecha v'yata yotzrenu. Anu rayatecha v'yata dodenu. Anu fulatecha v'yata kirovenu. Anu amecha v'yata malkenu.
Anu mamirecha v'yata
ma'amirenu.
We are insolent, you are gracious and compassionate. We are obstinate, you are patient. We are sinful, you are merciful. Our days are a passing shadow, but you are one who is for time without end. Dear God, hear our prayer. We are neither so insolent nor so obstinate as to claim in your presence that we are righteous and without sin, for we, like our ancestors who came before us, have sinned. Ashamnu, top of page 382.
Ay 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 Ashamnu,
Ashamnu,
Gadanu,
Gadnu,
Gazalnu,
Gazalnu,
Dibarnu Dofi,
Dibarnu Dofi.
ay 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 Evinu,
Evinu,
Vehir Shanu,
Vehir Shanu,
Zadnu,
Zahadnu,
Hamasnu,
Masnu,
Tafalnu Sheker,
Anu Sheker,
Yatsnu Ra,
Yatsnura,
Yizavnu,
Zahavnu,
Latsnu,
Lahatsnu,
Mararnu,
Rahadnu,
Yatsnu,
Yatsnu,
Mararnu,
Arnu,
Avinu,
Inu,
Ashanu,
Anu,
Sorarnu, Ishinu Orech, ay da ay da ay da ay da ay da ya da da ay da ay da Rashanu,
Rashanu,
Shichatnu,
Shichatnu,
Diavnu,
Diavnu,
Tainu,
Kainu,
Titanu,
Tita. We have turned from your laws and commandments, but it has not profited us. Surely you are right in respect to what comes upon us, for you have acted faithfully. Page 384, Al Chet. Al Chet, shechatanu lefanecha b'yonos v'ratzon, Al Chet.
Al Chetanu lefanecha b'yonos v'ratzon. Al Chetanu lefanecha b'yetzer hara. Al Chetanu lefanecha b'yodim lo yodim. Ve'al kulam Elo selichot selach lanu mecha lanu kapelanu. Ve'al kulam Elo selichot selach lanu mecha lanu. Selach lanu, mecha lanu,
Al chet shechatan levanecha b'masah matan al chet shechatan levanecha b'machal b'mishte al chet shechatan levanecha
al chet shatanu levanecha b'nayim ramot al chet shatanu levanecha b'azus metzah ve'al kulam Eloah selichot selach lanu me'alanu kapelanu vi'al kulam Eloah selichot selach lanu me'alanu selach lanu me'alanu על החטא אותנו לפניך, בתשומת יד, והחטא אותנו לפניך, ותמחול לבב, ועל כולם אלוהי סליחות, סלח לנו, נחל לנו, כפר לנו, ועל כולם אלוהי סליחות, סלח לנו, נחל לנו, סלח לנו, נחל לנו, כפר לנו.
Please be seated. We continue in the middle of page 386.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מהר אבותינו ביום הכיפורים הזה, מהר ויאבד פשענו וחטאותינו מנגד עיניך, כאמור, אנוכי אנוכי ומחה פשעיך למעני, וחטאותיך לא אזכור. ונאמר, מחיתי כאב פשעיך וחנן חטאותיך, שובה אלי כי גאלתיך. ונאמר, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם. לפני אדוני תצערו. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, קדשנו במצוותיך ותנקנו לתורתך, סבנו מצווך ושמחנו בשועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת. כי אתה סלחן לישראל ומחלן לשבטי ישרון בכל דור ודור, ובלעדיך אין לנו מלך אוהב וסולח אלא אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוכר וסולח לעוונותינו לעוונות עמו בישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה. מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל, מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל, מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים. רוצה אדוני אלוהינו ממך ישראל תפילתם, והשב עבודה לביר ביתך, ותפילתם באהבה תקבע רצון, ותהי רצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים. ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון, מודים אנחנו לך. הטוב כי לא הלא רחמך, ורחם כי לא תמו חסדיך, מעולם קיווינו לה, ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומן שמך מלכנו תמיד, לעולם ועד. אבינו מלכנו, זכור רחמך וכבוד כעסך, וחלב דרך וחרב ורעה, ושבי ומשחית, ויבון ושמר ומגפה, ופגע רע וכל מחלה, וכל תקלה וכל קטטה, וכל מיני פורעניות, כל גזירה, רעה ושנאת חינם, מעלינו ומעל כל בני בריתך, וכתוב לחיים, לחיים הטובים, כל בני בריתך, וכל חיים ידעוך סלע, יעלו את שמך באמת, האל ישועתנו זרתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולנאה, lechorot. Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, Barahenu babracha hamshuleshet batorah haktuva yeshet al yedei Moshe abdecha hamura mifi Acharon uvanav kochanim am kidoshecha kamor. Yivarech Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'kuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha.